Welcome back to the Pigskin Podcast. I am Ben Phersy. This is Jason Feldman. It's like 2 in the morning, Feldy.
Yeah.
As you can tell, Feldy looks like garbage. I mean, more so than normal.
I don't want to be left out.
But yeah, he's got his sport coat
Found
on.
this little number hanging on the rack over there next to your red one.
Yeah, right next to my red
Figured
one.
it must be there for me.
I feel like I should probably wear this to the playoff games this weekend.
I've been trying to get you to wear that thing all year.
You know, if you win,
It's
if you want to
about
bet,
time.
I think you'd probably be able to do it.
I beat you in picks every year. Isn't that enough?
Every year. Whoa. Let's pump the brakes.
This is like the 4th year in a row.
No, that's not accurate. I remember last year you had like a 7-game lead that you blew.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's rip through this stuff. This is a makeshift video. Literally, we have this thing propped up on some papers.
In the beautiful palatial studio, though, this week.
Yeah, you would not believe how many people lined up to try to shoot this thing at 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people, but
They're all standing right back there.
section finals, Feldy. Friday
They
and
are
Saturday
upon us.
night, all over the place. We've got a bunch of area teams going for rematches too. Holy cow! It's a lot of rematches of some good games during the regular season. So we're gonna forget the Vikings, forget the Gophers. We don't want to talk about either of those teams. We want to talk
They're
about the
both on buys this week.
I wish the Gophers were on bye this week. Fortunately, they're at Michigan, so they might as well be on a bye. But, Feldy, let's do our athletes of the week real quick here, or football players of the week. I'm going to go with Tate, red jacket, so I got to go with Tate Hebring from Austin. 304 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Austin scored more points than anyone this year against Owatonna, both times. And someone, I saw your favorite sports writer from Owatonna just recently wrote something about how 56% of the points that Owatonna gave up this season were to Austin.
From Austin.
That's,
I believe that. Well, Austin did that to a lot of teams.
They did.
Just
They can score points.
They can score points.
they needed to figure the defense.
Unfortunately, Owatonna can score more.
They still have that Williamson character who's a tough guy.
He's not bad, I hear.
Tough to bring
For
down.
running back.
Feldy, I was thinking about, by the way, why don't you, it's November.
Mm-hmm.
I see you got your,
I've been growing this since August.
I've been growing this since this morning.
So,
can you see
I'm
it?
getting close.
All right.
Getting close.
So
I'll
who's
keep
your player of the week?
Brady Essig, quarterback from Triton. He was 9
Love
for
him.
12 for 198 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a big 54-7 win for the Cobras against Lewiston Altura last week. But more than anything, I went with Brady because, talking to Carl Frichte this week, Carl doesn't hand out, the Caledonia coach, Carl doesn't hand out huge praise to his opponents, specifically individual players that his team's going to be going up against. But he had a lot of great things to say about Brady. And then talking to Don Henderson too, the Triton coach, he's the same way with his players. He's not gonna bend over backwards to praise his guys up one side and down the other. But the things he had to say about Brady, just his mastery of Triton's option offense, all the things they ask him to do, be it drop back thrower, decision making on the go, changing plays at the line of scrimmage. We hear a lot about Hunter Jennings, Drew Kelly, and deservedly so, and the Triton defense, but Levi Smith. But from talking to both of those coaches, it sure sounds like Brady is kind of the engine that makes things go for Triton, and we'll get a chance to see tonight how they do against Caledonia the second time around. We talked about those big rematches, and we'll talk more about the game coming up. But Brady Essig's my player of the week.
And Brady, I remember covering a game against Triton versus Cass 2 years ago when Brady was a sophomore, and I remember loving him then. When he was just easing his way into varsity football, and I think they weren't sure if they wanted to go with him at quarterback at that point because they rotated some guys. Little kid at that point, he's not real tall, but threw a great ball. Even as a sophomore, threw a great ball, and you could tell he was going to be a good football player. I'm glad they stuck with him, and he stuck with it.
I think that's part of what Coach Anderson was saying. Is just the quote he gave me was, Brady is as deep into our playbook and our offensive system as any quarterback that they've ever had, and that's saying a lot. Coming from a coach who's been there for 31 years now. He just topped the 251 mark here a couple of weeks ago. So
that's it.
I think I know. Come on,
Hendo.
By the way, between Carl Frichte and Don Henderson, the two coaches in that game tonight, they've won 77% of their games in 46 seasons combined. Almost 500 wins.
Seems decent, but Feldy, let's get right into picks because we don't want to make this too long a podcast at 2 in the morning because I'm sure we're not.
Because it's 2 in the morning.
Yeah,
probably not making a lot of sense.
2 in the morning. I'm sure I won last week. I'm kidding. We actually tied again.
Did we?
Last week. Yes, because we had two
I'm not
different.
surprised.
I got Cannon Falls right, and you got the 9-man. The 9-man game is what I got wrong. I was hoping Houston could pull one out against Cleveland. They couldn't get it done.
Cleveland
It was a
kinda pulled
close
away
game.
late.
Yeah, it was a close game until midway through the third. There, it was. I think it was a one-score game still midway through the third. So, go
What's
ahead.
going on with our camera?
It's still going.
We're
It's
fuzzy.
you're fine.
Gotcha.
It's just the
Low
battery's low. Sorry about that, folks.
It's
But
2 in the morning.
it is 2 in the morning, so hopefully no one even cares or notices that. But let's just jump right into the picks. The 9-man game right away, 5 o'clock Friday night. It's going to be Spring Grove facing Cleveland at Rochester Regional Stadium. We know how that first meeting went, and took a heck of a rally to force overtime, and then Spring Grove wins by a point in overtime. I'm pumped for that. The question will be the weather, and it
Right.
sounds like it's supposed to be pretty poor weather. And Cleveland's a throwing team. They've got the record-setting quarterback, Mr. Coppet, however you say it, and Plonsky, his receiver. They've broke pretty much every record our state has for throwing and receiving. How much is the bad weather going to affect those two? I don't know. We'll see.
I just have a feeling like as much football as those two guys have played, they've probably played in some pretty crummy weather, including making a run to the state championship game last year. Boy, this just feels like a game on turf, in a big game situation that these guys have been through before. And Spring Grove has been to some section championship games here too recently, haven't they?
Yeah,
And
they
them and
played
Grand
a
Meadow
lot of
they've kind of made an annual date of playing one another. But boy, like I said, on turf, Cleveland's game is all based on speed. I just feel like this one plays into their hands, and you and I were talking to Eric Atherton, who's going to be covering the game for us, about having fun typing up this box score, because I think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns scored. 103 points scored the first time these two teams played. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty darn close to that again. I'm going to take Cleveland 44-40.
What? You're going against the Lions?
Is that something wrong?
You never pick a dirty suburb of St. Peter like Cleveland.
You don't.
I don't. I'm going with Spring Grove. Come on. I think you're wrong. I think the weather is going to affect Cleveland. I think you talk about timing and weather like that can really throw things off. He's a good quarterback. He is. He's definitely a great quarterback, and he is going to have some success, and they are going to score some points, and they're going to make some plays. But I think this weather definitely plays into Spring Grove's hands. It's what they needed. It's going to be close. I think it's going to be not as high scoring as the first one, but I'm going Spring Grove 40-37.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I would love to see the Lions win this game, just for the
No,
fact
you wouldn't. I can tell.
that
You
they've
don't
been
want
such a good team over the last half decade, and they've had the best team in the state that they've had to try to get through in order to get to the state tournament. So, it'd be really cool to see Zach Hauser and the Lions get back to state this year.
Now let's talk about my favorite game. Caledonia versus Triton. That's the 8 o'clock game, Friday night at Rochester Regional Stadium. I know almost every football coach I've talked to in the area is going to be at that game because they want to see it too. Because I would argue that those might be the best two football teams we have in this area this year, regardless of class. And I'm sure that Century and obviously the bigger schools are going to argue about that, and Casson would be in that mix.
We should point out that we're not counting Winona in that mix either.
Correct, because Winona isn't technically in our coverage area. Because I would probably pick them, but
that would be a fun matchup to see.
I know.
Could you put 3 teams on the field at once?
Well, I
Caledonia,
even said
Triton,
I'd love to see Casson play these two teams this year. Unbeaten Casson team again. These two teams are 2 classes below Casson, but they don't play like it. And I've asked a couple other coaches that have played I asked a couple coaches how some local teams would stack up to Triton, and they all said Triton would beat them. So, you know what, Feldy, and this is my favorite game of the weekend. It might be the favorite game of the year. I'm going with Triton. I'm going with the Cobras. I think there's a mental hurdle they have to get over. They had them beat that first time. When things start going sour for a team that's lost to a team for a number of years in a row, it's easy to say, well, here we go again. And I don't know that that's what happened in that one, but when you blow a lead like that, it makes you wonder a little bit. I think Triton is every bit as talented as Caledonia this year, and everything they've done for the last few years has been building to this moment. As long as those kids don't let this moment be bigger than what they've been trying to accomplish here, I think they get it done. I think it's going to be every bit as exciting as we want it to be. I'm going to go with Triton 27, Caledonia 21.
Well, I was fortunate to be at that first game that they played this season and watch it happen, and think I drew the long straw tomorrow night too.
Yeah,
Tonight,
I
I should say, to be able to get to cover it again.
Your boss must like you.
He must. He's a good guy sometimes. But I think when you talk about Triton blowing that lead, a lot of it was Caledonia just kind of wore them down. Caledonia, they throw the ball so much that, Triton likes to bring a lot of pressure defensively. They like to blitz from all different directions, and that's what they were doing through the first 2.5 to 3 quarters of that game, doing it very effectively.
Mm-hmm.
They were making Owen King uncomfortable, which we don't see happen a lot. They were forcing him outside of the pocket. He did break contain a few times, and I know from talking to Don Henderson, Triton's coach, he wasn't happy with the way they handled things in that game. But they did. I mean, I've never seen a defense in the 3 years that I've watched Caledonia play make Owen King that uncomfortable. And so credit to Triton for doing that, and they're going to have to figure out a way to do that for 4 quarters. But what that also did was it caused Triton's receivers to play basically one-on-one man coverage with Triton's defensive backs, I should say, play that one-on-one man coverage for a full 4 quarters against Caledonia's receivers. And that wears a kid down, too, when you're talking about receivers. Oh, my gosh. I mean, you're talking about, receivers that run 20-yard routes. And you see high school routes most of the time are around that 20 yards, go to the sideline. Well, they're turning around and the ball's there on a dime, coming from Owen King. Talking myself in circles here.
Yeah, make a pick.
This is hard. I could see this going either way, as with many of these games. But until the champ is dethroned, I'm going to stick with them. So I'm going to pick Caledonia. I think it's going to be another close one. I think the Warriors pull it out, 30-28.
We'll touch on this next one quickly. Section 4, AAA. Cannon Falls is up at St. Croix Lutheran, top-ranked, undefeated St. Croix Lutheran. Cannon Falls has had a nice little run here, which I thought they would in that section. I picked them last week, and they easily took care of Breck. They're going to run into a buzzsaw. 7 o'clock tonight. Like I said, up in West St. Paul. I got to go with St. Croix Lutheran. I think it's been a heck of a run for the Bombers, but I think it ends tonight. I'm going to go with St. Croix Lutheran 30. Cannon Falls 14.
Yeah, we've kind of said all year that Cannon Falls is better than their record shows, but there's a difference in beating teams that are around 500 or above it and going up against the #1 ranked team in the state, so I can't disagree with you. I'll take St. Croix Lutheran as well. I'll say they win 28-14.
Section 1, 4A, 2 undefeated teams. Winona, 9-0, top ranked. Cass and Manorville, 9-0. They're ranked number 7 in 4A. That goes down at 7 o'clock tonight at Mayo High School, and I will be there. I talked to both coaches. Winona is an incredibly balanced football team. They don't have some stud that they give the ball to 20, 30 times. In fact, talking to their coaching staff, they don't have a single guy that's gotten more than 15 carries in any given game. That's crazy.
They're a lot like they were last year. If you remember watching them last year, where they had 4 or 5 guys, they would put a different running back in. 4
guys with 500 or more yards.
They would put a different running back in on every series.
Yep.
So you would see a kid run the ball 3 or 4 times for 40 yards on their first drive. They'd come back out and they'd throw a completely different back at you who could do the same thing.
So you got the horses.
Hey, very similar this year. They're strong on the offensive line. Once again, have a great quarterback in Riley Bostetter who can throw the ball around. And this is no knock on Cass and Manorville. Comets have had a great season, but Winona is they're a senior-heavy team. There's a real strong
16 seniors.
Yeah, there's a real strong sense of urgency there this year because, from talking to other coaches around here, I don't know what Winona's going to be like next year when they lose all those seniors. That's a lot of leadership and a lot of talent to lose. So I think there's just a real strong sense there that they need to get back to the state championship game this year and try to get it done again. So I'm going to take Winona in this one, 35-21.
Yeah, I think we got almost the same score. I think the big difference for Winona in this game to me is those 2 6'5" wide receivers they're going to throw at Casson. I don't know that Casson has someone who can defend those 2 guys, at least not consistently. You can't teach 6'5", and you're talking about 2 athletic kids that go up and get the football. Even if they weren't 6'5", they go up and get the football. So it's going to be an uphill battle. Casson's going to score some points in this game. I think Winkle's going to bust a couple runs, and Casson has a lot of kids that have played for a long time too here. But I'm gonna go with Winona 42-28. Like I said, I think Casson's going to score some points. I think they're going to have a hard time slowing down that Winona offense.
So if Casson is to win this game, what do they have to do?
They have to. I don't know. They have to use the weather to their advantage. I think if somehow they can neutralize the passing game in that sense, because Casson's not a team that throws the football often, I think their lines have to be good, and they have very good lines. So that might be okay. I think those two lines might be even. But they've got, like I said, Winona is so diverse. I think it's going to take a big effort from Casson to do it. But this team hasn't quit ever this year,
Right.
and I love that about them. They're not going there. I guarantee they're not showing up at Mayo High School Stadium to lose that football game.
Here's what I think Casson Manderville has in its favor if it's to win this game. Number one, they have to force turnovers. And
Which they can and will, I think.
And they have to control the clock, which they have an offense that is capable of doing. And I think, last week we'll talk about this in a bit, but I got to watch Plainview, Elgin, Millville beat Byron. It's exactly how they won the game. They controlled the ball for almost 32 minutes, almost 2/3 of the game. And I think you can't expect your team to go out and control the ball for 30 minutes in a game, but Casson has to do something similar to that, I think, in order to win this one.
Well, yeah, if Casson's going to win, it's going to be like a 14-13 kind of game. And you're right. That's what they have to do. They have to be smart with the football. Winkle has to be smart with his reads. He cannot put the ball on the turf.
Right.
I think, the other thing is how they respond to adversity is going to be the key thing, because something's going to go wrong. Things aren't going to go right in that football game, and how you respond to that turnover or that long touchdown is how you're going to.
And what happens if Winona strikes quickly and gets up by two scores in the first quarter? Casson Manderville has to keep that level head. They have to realize there's a lot of time left to play and just play their game.
Well, and it's what Coach Trinan talked about was down and distance. You cannot put yourself in bad down and distance, which Winona. That's how you lose that football game. Yep. So we better move on, though, fellas. We got some more games to pick. Century is over at Owatonna.
How about this one?
Century,
Who thought we'd be
the Cinderella
picking this game?
Team. With a defense like they have, though, we shouldn't be that stunned that they do this. Their defense has been incredible all year long. That said, Owatonna,
Owatonna's a
Mr.
different
Williamson
animal.
is absolutely a Division I football player in my eyes, and he's going to be terrorizing teams around this area for another year, unfortunately, for our city teams anyway. But I think the run ends for Century tonight. I think their defense is going to do some good things. I think they are going to frustrate Owatonna a little bit. But when you got a grinding running game like that, and Williamson is the kind of kid, he's a Robert Smith kind of guy, the guy that 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards, 60 yards. If Century is going to win that game, that's what they have to avoid. They have to take advantage of the 3-3-3. The other thing is Century's got to score some points, which has been a struggle for them.
Figure out a way to do that on offense.
Yeah, so I've got this game maybe a little closer than most. I've got it 28-13. Owatonna.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about Jason Williamson, Owatonna's stud running back, and deservedly so. I mean, the kid is, like you said, he's going to be a Division I football player, a Division I running back without question. But the other thing Owatonna has going for it, too, is if you somehow figure out a way to slow down that running game, they've got a quarterback, Abe Pavelka, who can throw the ball all over the place, too, if needed. They just haven't had to do that a lot this year. So, yes, it's going to be the biggest test that Century's defense has faced this year, and as well as the Panthers have played, there's no shame in coming away on the short end of a game like this. That doesn't mean they need to go in with that attitude. I mean, I think they've played well enough. They've won 2 playoff games, giving up, a total of about 18 points. Hey, go in there and lay it all out on the line, right? What do you have to lose?
They just beat a team that beat Owatonna.
Right. And it's like you said on Twitter last week, guys, just go enjoy your game. You don't know when your season, when your careers are going to be done. Go out, have fun. You're not going to remember the final score. You're going to remember the win, the loss, the playing with your buddies. Unfortunately, I think Owatonna just has too much firepower for Century and for most teams in the state. And I think the Huskies win maybe a little bigger than you do. Nobody's been able to hold that offense down, so I think they win about 49-14.
That's a lie that you won't remember the score, because I still remember the score of the 1995 Prep Bowl. So.
Oh, maybe it's because I never got to play. Maybe that's why I don't remember.
Well, neither did I. My knee was always...
I just stand here and pick games.
All right, we got to rip through these. We're running long.
2 more.
Section 1A, that is the 5 o'clock game on Saturday at Rochester Regional Stadium. Goodhue versus Blooming Prairie. Blooming Prairie gets a chance to avenge that loss. They avenged one last week to Rushford Peterson. And really looked good. They seem to be a team that's gaining some steam here. Feldy, who you got in that one?
Well, I will say this, Blooming Prairie, I got to watch their regular season game up in Goodhue, but I think Goodhue ended up winning by about 3 touchdowns, maybe a little bit more. They kind of blew it open in the second half. But
Blooming scored first in that,
Blooming got the ball first. They drove right down the field, put a really nice drive together, went up 7-0. I think they had Goodhue concerned for a good 2.5, 3 quarters there that game could go the other way. But man, Goodhue's defense is just so solid. They held Fillmore Central to 60 total yards, 34 rushing yards on 24 carries last week, and then you add in that kind of grinded out offense that can just wear you down with Mason Heeman and Casey Ryan and 4 or 5 different running backs. That's just going to be a tough team for anybody to beat. I'm going to take the Wildcats in another relatively low-scoring game of 24 to 18.
You can just insert first name here with Goodhue, Ryan, O'Reilly. It's just the same names, right? Yeah, I think when we talk about teams that are built for this time of year, this Goodhue team is built for this time of year. They run the football and they run it well. And for as long as I've covered Goodhue football, which would be dating back to 2000, 2001, they've been a very simple offense. Everybody knows what they're doing. There's no secrets on that offense. When I covered them, they ran the wishbone at the time, and it was just power, counter, trap. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. And it was like, if you can stop it, go ahead. And it was about execution and getting to the right spots and blocking the right people. I just think this Goodhue team is they're not exactly like that football team from back then, but they're built for this weather. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're going to play good defense. They're going to run the football. In bad weather, that's what you want. So I got to go with the Wildcats. I think it'll be a little low scoring, but I think it'll be, like a 21-7 kind of game. So. And
that's a really, really good section. Boy, I tell you what, whichever one of these teams gets through to state, they've earned their way there, without a doubt.
Last one, Feldy. Lourdes is going against Plainview Elgin Mill. Another Cinderella story. There's your number 6 seed in the section finals. That's the 8 o'clock game at Rochester Regional Stadium.
We've talked every week about how unpredictable, how wild this section is.
Yeah, and I talked to Kevin Lamb, and obviously had the big Q&A in the paper, which wasn't even going to happen, but he was so, I don't know, I just enjoyed, his words. And I'm as somebody who studies leadership a lot and has read a lot of books about leadership, when I see someone who's a good leader and someone literally just reading his words, I'm like, I'd play for that guy. Kevin Lamb is doing something right, and he's got a great staff over there, and they kept kids who were losing football games buying in, and that's hard to do, especially when you're talking about high school kids.
Yeah, after they beat Byron last weekend, I was standing on the field there just sort of listening into their huddle after the game.
Spotting.
Yeah, I was actually. I recorded the whole thing and sent it to Coach Kessler for you, as you asked. No, but I was just listening to Kevin talk to the guys and watching the way that they watched him and the way that they kind of talked to one another after the game. This is a team that's playing with a lot of confidence, as anybody should be in this section right now. And it's not that they can't win the game on Saturday. They absolutely can go out and win that game. But when I think of traditional Rochester Lourdes teams and the way that Coach Kessler has them playing at this time of year, the effort and the amount of time that they put into scouting. And
so yeah, if either one of these teams gets behind early, like by quite a bit, like even 2 scores, and you have to start throwing against this, they're going to be in trouble. So that's the one thing you got to avoid, is you can't fall. So yeah, I'm going with the Eagles. It's going to be a heck of a football game. I'm excited to cover that one. It's going to be execution. I think Coach Kessler said it right. It's going to come down to which team executes on Saturday night. They're even football teams. I don't care what the record says. So I'm going to go with the Eagles, and I think I don't know who's winning that football game. I'm going to go with Lourdes 21-20.
I agree.
All right, so we apologize for the technical difficulty. Regardless, I'm taking Lourdes 21-20. I think it's going to be a heck of a football game. Let's wrap this up before our video dies again.
Okay.
Feldy, get out to a football game or 4 this weekend. I don't know why you wouldn't, but
just sit at Rochester Regional Stadium all weekend.
We'll be back next week if we've got a bunch of teams at state. We'll probably be back.
We'll be back.
Thanks for watching.